So, so
Did I help you?
as you've conveyed before, I was like your biggest helper in the family. Like I liked to take care of our siblings. I liked to take on a maternal role from a young age. I felt like it was almost like I was playing house, but real house. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Okay, so I'll give you an instance that happened years ago, of course, because Chloe's now 14. Your younger sister, Chloe, was an infant. Now, most people would be afraid to touch an infant because they're very fragile. Even some parents are afraid to touch infants. I had a migraine headache, and you saw this. You walked into the room and you said, Mom, I'll take the baby. I'll feed her for you. I'll never forget it. You were so mature, and you scooped her up and you fed her her meal. It was a bottle. And you
Here's the
burped
ball.
her.
Really?
And you burped her. Well, I'm not sure if you were successful at burping her, but you attempted to.
That's really funny. Yeah, I feel like, wow. So what was my relationship like with my siblings, and like how was that an indicator of who I was and who I am now?
Your relationship with your siblings was positive. You always wanted, you're very, very concerned about them. So you have tremendous, love for them, and it's very apparent. It hasn't always been successful, but what I would say is it ebbs and flows. It's more on them than you. But one thing I can say is you were a wild kid, and you don't forgive it in your sisters.
Interesting.
So whereas you did some crazy stuff, you're like the classic person who's like, you can't do that, but you can't remember that you did it.
I think,
See, I always come at this. I'll tell a story that I ran into a mom at a supermarket, and she told me her husband whipped into her children like she's never seen because one of them was drinking that night. And I said to her, "Oh, does that happen normally?" She goes, "Oh, no, never." And I said, "Did your husband and you drink when you were younger?" She goes, "We were so wild." And so my question to her is, so you were allowed to be wild and do stupid things, but you're not going to allow your own children to do that? And she said, nope. And that's not what life is about. Life is about messing up, all sorts of experiences. We cannot be hypocrites, right? If we all did this, there was a reason. Our brain told us to do this. We had a teenage brain. So us as adults, looking at it might look like it's crazy behavior, but if we did it, then there was a reason, right?
so yes. And so are you saying that you did not discipline us to the maximum because you wanted us to learn from our own mistakes? Like, how did you take on a parental role and try to be a discipline? Like, did you think I needed discipline? Did you let me, like, what was your tactic?
So, well, my tactic was more like raising you guys to be who you wanted to be, not who you guys what I wanted you to be. It was more who you wanted to be. So I tried to take kind of an almost a laissez-faire like approach where I kind of stood back and allowed you to create your own stimuli, anything that you wanted to do or thought you should be doing, but within the guidelines, watching, always observing. So I think that some of my parenting lacked on enough discipline, but a lot of it, I think, made you a much more responsible person because you were able to be in control of your destiny. And so if you went out that evening and you decided to drink till you got sick, that was your fault. That wasn't me telling me you couldn't, you telling you couldn't, excuse me. It was you not giving yourself limits. And I think you learned how to limit yourself because you were in control.
Interesting. So, do you have any regrets when you're like, when you think of me as who I am now and who I become? Do you wish you did anything a little bit differently when I was from the 8 like up to 12 years old? Because I feel like those shape who you are. Like, their first like 12ish years kind of shape like who you become, your morals.
Well, of course, I wish I spent more time with you. Always, that's always something that. I mean, I was with you most of the time, but there were times where I was definitely very busy. So I guess more quality time. I wish I had the ability to take you away alone without your siblings, but you all know who I am, so I won't get into that.
Get into it.
But
Get into it. Let's hear what you got to say about yourself.
well, no, I could never leave the house. I was never good with leaving and taking a trip with just one kid
Right.
because I was too nervous to leave the children behind. and due partly because of your father. He just wasn't a responsible adult dad, I should say.
So what was dad like as a parent?
What was dad like?
Yeah.
You know, the more difficult any of you became, the less, you know, he wanted to be around you. I think that if things ran smoother and you were more academic, he would have had more to relate to you with. As I can imagine in college, he loves those phone calls when you need help from him with a paper, because that's where dad shines. And so I think had you found more, you know, in common with dad, your relationship would have been stronger.
Very interesting. So dad is an academic, yet he became an entrepreneur. Well, I don't really know.
He was an academic.
I don't really know what he is. What would you classify him as? Because you're both entrepreneurs, and how do you think that has had an impact on who I have become?
Well, I think you see that we're willing to live life on the edge, and we don't go into a complete panic mode when things are difficult. We function quite well, given all the pressures that we're under. And every single day we get out of bed fighting to make everything better each day instead of being disappointed. So I think you've kind of globbed onto our strength.
Interesting. Okay.